Hey, what's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. My name is Art Janowick. I'll be the host of the presentation. Brian is on the right-hand side of your screen. He's going to be in the chat room. He's going to make sure that everything goes smoothly, answer any questions as we move throughout. For those of you that are with us right now, and I'm seeing this number tick up as I'm talking, so I know people are coming on in right now too, go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. Grab some water, grab some soda, grab some coffee if you're an afternoon drinker, and then we're going to get started shortly as soon as the other folks settle on in. I usually like to give a minute or so to get those folks in here and get situated with the technology. So again, I'm your host, Art Janowick III. I will be here with you shortly, about 30 seconds or so. Go ahead and close your office door and also grab someone to write with as well. I have one special activity in there too for you guys to take notes on. So, all right. Thanks, guys. All right, we are going to get started. Again, I am your host, Art Janowick. I will share my screen with you so you guys can begin to see what's going on here. From Brian. All right. Cool. So again, I am your host, Art Janowick III. Brian, you think I'd be more organized now, but I was trying to get stuff prepped here. Brian is going to be the chat room guy, making sure that everything goes smoothly. He's going to make sure that you guys have everything you need. I also see in the chat right now some people can't get connected. Make sure that you have everything you need to get connected. We use YouTube as a back end, and I know sometimes schools block that. So I'm hoping we can get past that because a lot of times we can. If not, then I know there's a test connection to in the email that was sent to you guys. But this is SEL Simplified, using social and emotional learning to improve outcomes and behaviors. Go ahead and use Brian as your chat room guy, your questions guy. If he doesn't answer them right away, that's because he's going to save those for the end because we do have some Q&A. But although I'm trying to simplify social and emotional learning, it is still complex. So we're going to jump in, and I'm hoping to only take right around 60 minutes, including the Q&A session, and get you guys on with your day. So a little bit about me to start. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing for Conover. I love all things Chicago. I'm originally from right outside the city, born and raised, and now I am housed and our company is up in Northeast Wisconsin. So behind enemy lines during football season, if you will. And I enjoy spending time with my family. I have two little girls, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and my beautiful wife. We love doing, especially in the fall, all the activities that you can up here before winter comes, right? Although this weekend up here is supposed to be right around 90 degrees, like 86 or 87 degrees, which is like second summer to us. But I know all you folks in the South and in Arkansas and all that are used to that type of temperature now. But I played football at St. Norbert College. Okay, I played football there. I graduated, and I planned on becoming a teacher. That was my original objective. And I'm extremely passionate about social and emotional learning. And my intention is that that passion will come through this webinar, come through this presentation this afternoon to you. And all of you that are here right now, that you signed up and you took the time to attend, number one, it won't be a waste of your time. But number two, you're passionate about it too, right? You see the power of social emotional learning, okay? So the overall session goal, a couple of line items to get through here before we jump into the content. I want to have you guys understand how social and emotional learning can improve outcomes and create positive behaviors. Because it can happen. And I'm going to show you how. So the steps. We're going to go into why social and emotional learning. We're going to go into why social and emotional learning. We're going to go into examples of social and emotional learning and what skills, what competencies to look for. All right. We're going to go into how social emotional learning fits into PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports for special education, how it fits into ESSA, the new Education and Secondary Act. We're going to jump into evidence-based tools to improve outcomes, right? What that looks like. And then we're going to wrap it up with the Q&A at the end. All right. So why social and emotional learning? Well, the big reason is that social emotional learning account for about 85% of success in life. Soft skills, social emotional learning, these employability skills, emotional intelligence, right? Hard skills account for the other 15%. And where these stats come from is that it's actually a study that was done over 100 years ago through the School of Engineering and the Carnegie Foundation. 100 years ago, they found that these statistics were held true with certain individuals in the study. And yet here we are focusing on a lot of the hard skills to make up that 15%, but we try and kind of apply that across the board. Employers are looking for the interpersonal skills that help people to communicate and collaborate effectively. And when you think about school, especially the K-12 setting, but especially the post-secondary setting, community colleges, universities alike, the whole point of education is to prepare a person for the world of work, whether it's they're an employee or they are an entrepreneur, they become an employer, right? Startup, San Francisco, all that stuff, right? So those are kind of the two options when you work and you contribute positively to your society. So when we look at employers, if they're looking for the interpersonal skills, these social emotional learning skills that help people to communicate and collaborate effectively, we need to try and understand what we're doing in the schools to get to that point, right? Employers are looking for things like attitude. It's important to have a positive attitude. There are some things that you just don't want to do. Sometimes after my Bears, right, my Chicago Bears, they lose, I don't want to work on Monday. Deal with all these Packer fans, right? But someone's got to do it. I got to do it. So I better be positive when I do it. Critical thinking. Use information to make clear, well thought out judgments. Planning and organizing. You're in a better position to make these better decisions if you've planned and organized well. It helps reduce costly mistakes. Professionalism. So overall actions expected of a professional. There's a reason, if we look at the athletic or football perspective, right? There's a reason that there are professional and amateur athletes. The expectations are greater when you're at that greater level, both on and off the field, right? The NFL and the CFL and college football, they're very different. Only select few make it to that top echelon of the National Football League, right? So that expectations are greater. Empathy, the ability to understand and share feelings, being in another person's frame of reference, literally putting yourself in their shoes. What is this person feeling? Goal setting. It's important to set attainable goals, right? And then not only set them, but then you got to achieve them. You got to get there. Time management and communication skills. And with communication, it's not just talking, but it's a two-way street. So making sure that you're listening and actively listening. And these are all social emotional skills or emotional intelligence. Okay, so let's look at the dictionary definition of both of those things. So emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Mouthful, I know. Castle defines social emotional learning as the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage their emotions. So here we are with EQ, emotional intelligence, telling us about expressing emotions and handling interpersonal relationships. And social emotional learning is understanding and imagining and managing emotions. These two are very closely linked. And in fact, if one could argue even that they're the same, it's just a matter of syntax or who you talk to, right? Right? Whose agenda they're pushing, right? Those kind of things. Whose ego needs to be talked about. But they're the same thing. It's about managing, understanding your emotions and the emotions of others. And so when we talk about those things, those are the things that employers are looking for, right? Well, here's one critical study. And in fact, it's probably one of my favorite. That's why I use it so early on. Is this was actually a study done by the the American Association of Colleges and Universities. And what they did was they went out to employers. They said, okay, I'm trying to prepare my students for the world of work. So, employers, what learning outcomes do you rate as important? They said, hey, what do you rate as important? So, the employers said, well, let me tell you, oral communication, and I know this is small, so I'll read this to you guys. Oral communication, working effectively with others and teams, written communication, ethical judgment and decision making, applying knowledge and skills to the real world, analyzing and solving complex problems, locating and organizing and evaluating information, being innovative and creative, working with numbers and stats, analyzing and problem solving with people with different backgrounds. So here we are asking employers what learning outcomes they rate as important. And only one, that's number 9 on the list, working with numbers and stats, math, is a hard skill. Everything else is social and emotional learning or soft skills or emotional intelligence, right? Communication, teamwork, communication, decision making, critical thinking, right? Problem solving, critical thinking, problem solving. More of a rhetorical question, but what are you doing to streamline and address these things? Because the bottom line is you need to be able to work with people. I had this conversation just yesterday or Monday, but I was talking with somebody, a customer, and I was telling her that, no matter how automation or how automated our world gets, and people are concerned about that, you'll still need to be able to work with people, right? And I talk about how there's just a recent study here in Northeast Wisconsin talking about manufacturing and how, maybe they don't have a forklift operator job because that's automated now, but now they need a mechanic to work on the technology that runs that automated forklift, right? Or a team of people that runs the automation. So that's new skill sets, but more jobs. Same thing happened back when ATMs in the banks were first introduced. Everyone was hung up on the fact that, man, now tellers are going to lose their jobs because I can get money out of an ATM and that's going to eliminate that. Well, it eliminates menial tasks that can be automated. But in fact, what we saw was a drastic increase in bank jobs. And the reason was because to open up a branch was less costly because they didn't have to hire as many people. So now banks were able to spread geographically versus having 12 people, 20 people in one bank spot. They had 4 or 5 and then opened up 4 or 5 branches. It changed the game. But regardless, you still need, and in fact, more so, you need to be able to work with people. Why do you need to be able to work with people? Here's another visual example of it. Why? It's called the turnover process. And what it says is that some companies hire for reason 1 or 2. They'll hire because your composure, your smile, your personality, right? That initial, man, this guy's got it. He's in sales and he's got a great smile, good looking, all that stuff, right? Or reason number 2, education, credentials, certification. He went to the best IT school and he worked at, went to the Black Hat Conference and won a grant, etc. So he's certified in cybersecurity. Maybe Equifax should have maybe hired him, right? But that's why people get hired. Reason number 3 are why companies lose people. They don't communicate. They don't have the social skills. They got a really poor attitude. They can't adapt. They're not committed. They can't manage their stress. They don't manage themselves. So now managers need to micromanage. They're not motivated. They show up late all the time. How many of you within the last month have heard from either somebody, because you're in education, so somebody in the field talking to you about the students that you're preparing, and or a loved one just in general conversation about millennial this, millennial that, right? About how, man, I just wish I could have someone that shows up and works hard. If I'm willing to bet, it's probably the majority of you. All three of these things are tied together. Let's look at an example. Let's say Johnny comes into school with a bad attitude because he and his mom got into an argument. That results in him not showing up to class on time. He was frustrated. He forgot his homework because he got into an argument. His head wasn't in the right spot with his mom, right? He becomes frustrated and becomes disruptive. But his teacher, who doesn't know any of this stuff happened at home, is mad because all that he or she sees is Johnny didn't come prepared and now he's disruptive. So what do? You kick him out of class, you write him up, etc. So how many of us have also been in that situation? Well, that's just class time, right? That's easy to make up, etc., etc. In the real world, turnover is very expensive. The most expensive expense, if that makes sense, right? For any company is going to be payroll, is going to be salaries and benefits by far, right? And so when you have to constantly hire, train, fire, and you get this big circle, that's going to be very costly. In fact, talking to HR managers, that's the majority. That's what I hear, right? So what would have happened though in that situation if Johnny had a positive attitude? He was able to manage his stress. He was able to adapt and compartmentalize. Say, hey, I got to focus now. Yeah, I'm kind of pissed at my mom, but I'm going to be productive. I'm going to go home. We're going to talk about it. Some of us need help with these things, right? Myself included. And you need to know how to look for these things. Let me give you an example. This is what I want you guys to do. For those of you that have joined a little bit late or just joining us, I had asked about doing getting a piece of paper. Okay. And so this is the project that I want you guys to do. So draw this over here on the right-hand side that you see. This, you don't have to write the words, just this guy. So draw it exactly as you see it, minus my circle. It's called the dot project. I'm going to give you guys some time to do this, but what I want you to do is connect all 9 dots using 4 straight connected lines. So basically start on a dot and draw 4 straight lines and don't lift up your pen or pencil. And again, I'll give you guys some time to do this because I want you guys to really, and don't just pretend. I went to a conference, I was doing a talk and like half the people were just staring at me and I was like, at least, try and pretend that you're doing this, right? Now I can't see you guys, but I'm hoping that you guys can do this. To work on it. Where it's like your students when you're doing something and you ask them to do something, and they're not. You're like, come on. All right, I'll give you a little bit more time. For those of you just joining us, my name's Art Janowick III. And Brian Fleischman is in the chat. I see him typing away with you guys as well. So I'm hoping all you guys do this. Nancy, Mary, Denise, Aaron, Paula, Rebecca, Erica. I'm just kind of scrolling through the list, calling you guys out in case you're sleeping. All right, so I'm going to give you guys the project here. I'm going to give you guys the results of this project. Now, for some of you, like I did this once and someone nailed it. And I'm like, man, you are a genius. Because if you're like me, you're sitting here drawing circles or trying to figure out like, okay, this has to be a trick, right? Like, maybe straight line is like more philosophy. Like maybe straight line means circle. So I didn't get it right, and I'm not good at this, but this is the answer. And what's interesting is that's an example of critical thinking, right? A literal example of critical thinking outside the box. Pardon the pun, right? That was kind of why I liked that idea, because I was like, oh, perfect. I can do some puns. But you probably heard when you come up with a new idea, someone say, well, no, we're not going to do that. Why? Well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, perfect. Then let's go back to A-Tracks. Let's go back to the Model T. Why not, right? It's about getting better, becoming more efficient, right? Streamlining the process. Who would you rather have working for you? Someone who just does what they're told, or someone who can think creatively about problems and identify new and better solutions? Well, we know the answer, right? We know the answer. Emotional intelligence is the new yardstick. It's not meant to measure against old standards like general intelligence, basic skills, and math. And again, I reiterated this in an email, but also we're not against those skills. People always say like, oh, Conover or art or whatever, right? He hates math or he hates reading or writing. And that's not the case at all. It's just that these new rules have little to do with what we were told was important in school, because we have to take into account these personal qualities like interpersonal awareness, like empathy, like motivation or resiliency or grit or adaptability or the willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done. Because again, as far as those hard skills, you need those to be successful in your jobs. Absolutely. That's why I'm not against them. If you're a mechanic, you need to know metric measurements versus standard, because that's huge, right? Especially if you're working on a foreign car versus like a Ford, and you're like, man, I got a 15 millimeter bolt versus a half inch, right, to take off the calipers or take off the brake cylinder or whatever. Like you need to know that stuff, and that's reading comprehension. That's critical thinking. You need to know the millimeter to set the gap on a spark plug to make sure the engine sparks. For cosmetology, you need to know the difference with hair color and what the different things mean, right? As far as when you're reading directions and how to do things, when you get that training, right? You need to know math if you're in retail. So absolutely those things are critical. But when you look at the percentages of what it takes to be successful and to be really successful, numbers don't lie, which I'll get into in just a second. But see, emotional intelligence is the single most important influencing variable in personal achievement, career success, leadership, and life satisfaction. And the thing about it that people often, whether it's misconceived or whether it's a misunderstanding, they can be learned, they can be modeled, they can be applied. You can improve. It's not something that you inherently have. Now, some people have more than other people, and we know that, right? You ever have a conversation with someone that you first meet, you met them, you walk away, and you're like, man, I could not see myself talking to that person more than I just did, right? Or we are very not, we don't have much in common. Or, man, he's not aware of himself or what he just said. You can learn these things. It takes practice. It's hard work, but you can. Right? And here's what I mean by that. Here are some real life examples of social emotional learning, emotional intelligence at work. Okay. At L'Oreal, the cosmetics company, sales agents selected on emotional competence outsold salespeople using old procedures on an annual sales basis of $91,370. Almost $100,000 per salesperson. On top of that, these same sales agents selected on emotional competence, 63% less turnover. Less turnover. So not only were they making more money, the company's making more money, they're not leaving the company. Heck, this is great. Well, think about it. They're in sales, most likely working off commission. So if they're making almost $100,000 per year more than the guy next to them, Well, then guess what? I'm making more money than him. I'm going to be happier, right? Ideally. So I'm not going to leave unless you fire me for whatever reason, right? Or get a better gig. But the point is, this is a comparative analysis between emotional competence versus not emotional competence. In a large beverage firm, 50% of division presidents left after 2 years. When they used emotional competencies to hire, only 6% left after 2 years. And on top of that, those division presidents with these competencies outperform their targets by 15 to 20%. So not only was there a 44% drop in division presidents leaving, but they also hit their targets. We're above 15 to 20%. That's crazy. That's crazy. Sales reps at a computer company hired on their emotional competencies were 90% more likely to finish their company training versus those hired on other criteria. Those are real life statistical examples of emotional intelligence at work. Now, some of the students that you have in your classroom, some of the reason that you sign up for this webinar. Here's an example of a well-adjusted individual. This Venn diagram represents a well-adjusted individual. And what we see is that there is a great deal of overlap between reality. Reality is this blue guy right here, and self-image is the yellow guy. So there's a lot of overlap there. So this is maybe a youth that shows a lot of effort. They communicate well with their peers and classmates and teachers, and they work great as a teammate. Well, man, you ask their teachers or a loved one or friends, and they'll tell you the same exact thing. There's that overlap there. There's that consistency from what others see and what they see in themselves. Well, you guessed that the opposite of that is going to be a poorly adjusted individual. There is just a little bit of overlap between reality and their own self-image. These are the individuals that you probably see in your classrooms. This is the reason that you signed up for the webinar today. Social emotional learning is an integral part of these folks' success. I have a personal vested interest in it because I'm one of those kids, right? Good at sports, in school, right? Didn't really care, wasn't committed. I didn't want to buy in because well, why? What's the point, right? I didn't have that connectivity. But learning these skill sets through sports, thankfully, I was able to overcome my deficiencies. Okay. And so let's take a look at some key skills to identify in your students. Okay. Here are some personas that I put together for you guys to sit back. I want you guys to kind of internalize and feel, oh man, I know Jonathan, or I know Kim, or I know Genevieve. Okay. This is Jonathan. He lays his head down on his desk, does the absolute minimum, so you don't have to come up and talk with him. When you try to involve him, he doesn't answer the question, tries to change the subject, maybe he interjects a joke, right? Everyone starts laughing. Then what happens? Well, you're not going to call on him again because he just ruined the whole class, right? Good. He got his way. That's low productivity. Jonathan. This pattern would indicate on an individual like Jonathan, he's not very productive right now. Chronically mediocre self-esteem and stress management skills because of receiving little respect, but generally feels pretty good about associating with others. If you look at drive strength, motivation, decision-making, time management, sales orientation, which we couple with leadership, because to be in sales, you got to sell someone on an idea or a thing, right? And that takes leadership for them to follow you. Commitment ethic, they're all low. Now, it's problematic for Jonathan, who tends to get along with others just fine, but doesn't really do much at school. Eventually, change orientation, which I'll get into in just the next persona, stress management, and self-esteem scales, they'll get worse as crises happen in school or at work. Now, this profile for Jonathan could be chronic if teachers, supervisors, counselors don't step in to try and help him out. Low productivity. Jonathan. Here's Kim. Now, Kim, she tries really, really hard, sometimes too hard. She feels like she has let a lot of people down in her life, so she tries to please everybody. Parents, grandparents, teachers, friends. She seems happy on the outside, but sometimes she cries at night because of all the pressure that she puts on herself. Personal abuse or burnout. Now, there's high stress and declining personal wellness and self-esteem. Now, permission is granted for others to run all over Kim if we look at the high deference score, right? Deferring personality. She'll just defer. Low stress management and assertiveness skills, and not much personal comfort with students is indicated. Reliance on her leadership or sales orientation is high, possibly more of a conning mode. But the desire to change is great. Now, change orientation, in my opinion, is the most important scale. Personal change orientation. What this shows is a person's openness or willingness to change. Is it low or is it high? If it's high, that means that that person's willing to change. They're open to change. But like Kim, it probably won't happen without the firm help of someone else. Okay, so that's what's really unique about this, is the fact that we can see with these competencies change orientation. Because if all of these scales are really, really low, and it's like, man, you got to develop these social emotional skills, but change orientation is high, man, I'm going to go help her because she wants to improve, but maybe she just doesn't know how. So I'm going to help her get there because she's open to it. And vice versa. They're all low, but change orientation is low. Well, guess what? They're comfortable. This person, right, would be comfortable with where they're at. It's going to be much harder to get them to change because they're not open to it quite yet. We got to get that first. Okay. But that's personal abuse or burnout for Kim. Now here's Jenny. Jenny doesn't really have a group of friends. She hangs out in all the groups in high school, all the cliques, right? She's involved in some school activities, but more just to kind of be a part of something. She doesn't really show the motivation to really want to succeed. That's systematic low self-esteem. Now, some scales on this profile are quite high, but the scales that are highly correlated with self-esteem are all very low. So Jenny doesn't really like herself at this point in life, and for that matter, doesn't really like life that much. And notice that change orientation is not as high as you might think it would be for someone who just doesn't really like what's going on right now, right? That pinpoints more than anything else the degree to which Jenny just doesn't really care anymore. Low physical wellness, low self-esteem indicates little regard for health and possibly a moderate case of depression. This person needs help from a qualified professional to get those interventions. In fact, one of the things that I had seen recently, and I had it on my desk, but I think it's gone now, is an article recently written about anxiety and how, and I'm going to mess the percentages up, so I apologize, but it was somewhere around 20 years ago or so, it was right around 7% or so of the students in high school have anxiety or have those thoughts, whereas now it's upwards of 30%. And so that's just yet another thing that we see with students. And when you have anxiety or systematic low self-esteem or these competencies that we're trying to measure, that's going to hinder the educational process, i.e. state testing, other high stakes testing, that big geography test, that big reading test because you forgot to read the book because you have other things going on. Then how are you going to take a test if you didn't read the book? All those things factor into the academic realm, and we have to make sure that we can connect the two as well. Here's Marcus. Marcus's parents are divorced. He lives with his dad who went to jail already, and he doesn't have too many positive role models in his life. He hangs out with people involved in drugs and bullies a lot of the kids in school. Anytime he'll get out of class or he can get out of class, he'll take it. That's lethal or destructive behavior. Now, individuals with this profile are on a self-destructive course. Very little good is happening with Marcus right now at the present moment. He doesn't like himself, and the future looks very, very dark. And relationships with others are almost beyond repair without that outside help. He feels he has little influence on how things are going at school or at work or at home. Now, we can see through the high deference, he's deferring, right? Very difficulty standing up to others and dealing with conflict, sensitive to threat. But if we look at change orientation, good. Let's help Marcus get on his way. Right? Let's help Marcus get past lethal, destructive behavior. Here's Michael. Michael is a behavior problem. Anytime you confront him with something positive or negative, he has an outburst. He thinks the worst, regardless of the situation, and doesn't show up to class very often. The one thing that keeps him going is technology. And in fact, he built an application that helps you pick out your outfit in the morning so you can get ready faster. But he's the aggressive student. And individuals with this profile could be a real problem. Self-esteem's low. They don't get along well with people, and they don't really care, right? If you look at empathy, what do I care what they feel like, right? And if we look at high aggression down here near the bottom, that's also high. But the reason we see that high aggression is he wants to exhibit that in order to feel good about himself, right? Raise his self-esteem. We see that with some bullying. The most important thing is to get his way no matter what. They're angry at the world, people like Michael. Any little thing could set him off. He has a tendency to rebel and be resentful, and usually be overly sensitive when confronted. And if we look at change orientation, he's not really interested in changing right now. Right? It'll be an uphill battle for Michael, the aggressive student. Now here's Genevieve. Genevieve is a student who you trust. You ask her to get something during class because you trust her, right? You can rely on her, but she's an average to below average student. She's a great person though, right? She's a great person. She never scores well on tests and often turns in homework that's kind of half-hearted. She does enough to get by, but as soon as the bell rings, she's out the door, right? Genevieve is the potential dropout problem. Now, the major causes of people leaving school, or work for that matter, usually has nothing to do with the actual situation. It's centered around that perception of reality. So when students perceive that they're not liked, or that they're inadequate, or that there's no real reason for staying where they are, they're most likely to quit and look for a place that they do feel accepted, right? That they believe that the activities that they're doing are important. So those three causes tend to manifest in self-esteem, interpersonal awareness, and drive strength motivation. Any one of these scales can indicate that students may leave, because remember, it's not what's true that's important, it's what one perceives to be true, right? That the quote, perception is reality. And the students that have these profiles, that fit these personas, they're in your schools. And my intention is to not have you feel sorry for your situation or think that everything's bad, because it's not, but it's reality. You know, let's face it. But the power is, if you recall throughout this whole presentation, the power is that you can learn these skills. You can get better with your social emotional learning. Once you identify these personas, these competencies, these scales, once you do that, you can begin to improve academics and graduation rates. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. This was a study done, and I'll get into this more with the success profiler in about 10 minutes, maybe 8 minutes. But what this shows is percent of student retention, and not like retention in the sense of, great, he's got to repeat freshman year, right? But more so, did they come back between first, second, and third quarter? And what we found was if you incorporated social and emotional learning, by the end of quarter number 3, there was about a 50% improvement in students coming back versus those students that didn't. They dropped out. They left. 50%, right? Right around 80 and right around 30% retention when incorporating social and emotional learning. Another study talked about GPAs, because we talk about, hey, when you get into a good college, you got to put on there what classes you took, your GPA, your ACT, SAT, all that stuff, right? Those students that went through the Success Profiler had social and emotional learning incorporated on top of the academic side of things, showed a 1-point improvement in grade point average from a 1.79 to a 2.79. Right? There's also studies about trying to incorporate academic success, and you're thinking to yourself, well, how does this even make sense? We're not even talking about any additional academics. We're just talking about social emotional learning. How does it improve? Well, think about it. If I teach resiliency to my students, when they fail that math test, fight or flight response, what's going to happen? They're going to fight. They're going to take ownership. They're going to study. They're going to bring back. So the next time that there's a test, they'll get that C+ instead of quitting. If I teach another component is more frequent positive behaviors and fewer conduct problems such as bullying. Well, if I teach empathy, I'm going to feel what that person's feeling. So maybe I won't try to punch him. And if I understand my attitude and my interpersonal awareness, I'll be aware of what I'm saying in certain situations and if it's appropriate or not. Okay? And so this infographic, actually, Brian, if you want to post this in there, I'll definitely give this to you guys too. You guys can download this. It's a link that he'll post in there. So, all right, now tying it into PBIS, because one of the things that we talk about with social emotional learning, and one of the common questions we have is, how do I incorporate this, Art? We have so much going on. What do I do? Well, one of the ways that we've seen it is in special education, because under positive behavior interventions and supports, it's an IDEA law, and it's the only approach to address behavior specifically mentioned in the law. Because what we want to try and do is understand what maintains an individual's challenging behavior, right? Because they're hard, these behaviors, right, are hard to change because they serve a purpose. You and I do things a certain way because we think that behavior or that way to drive to work or this way of doing things, it's being reinforced in the environment that we're in. We think it's the best way to do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't take Casaloma down to work. Casaloma Street's a street by me. Down to work if all of a sudden I'm thinking, man, that's not the best way, right? I got to get there, so I'm going to take that way. So it's the same way with behavior. It's hard to change. And we have this least restricted environment to ensure students are in a position to succeed academically with their peers. And so when we talk about these interventions, when we talk about PBIS, we don't want to discipline or say, hey, go over here and do this. We got to integrate them into the classroom. So we want to make sure that we have a way using technology, using assessments, using this approach, which I'll get into, to incorporate social and emotional learning to improve behaviors. Okay. It's under ESSA. ESSA, right? One of the factors that we see under the Every Student Succeeds Act is non-academic factor of success. And this is critical because, yes, there's some leniency with it as far as the jargon in the law, but it talks about anti-bullying programs. It talks about social emotional learning a little bit. It talks about teaching the whole child, 21st century learning, college and career readiness, right? There's some leniency towards that. But one of the problems is we want to be able to incorporate this long term. So not just having a speaker come over and say, hey, I want to be able to teach you this for 8 hours and then nothing changes. right? Because the next day we're just going to go back to normal. We want to have this long-term success. So bring it all together. Starting from the top, for those of you that joined us a little bit late, emotional intelligence and social emotional learning are what employers want. Ultimately, the goal of education is to prepare them for college, and then college obviously is for careers. So if what employers are looking for are these soft skills, these social emotional learning skills, then we need to incorporate these things to prep them. SEL also improves academics. So here we are not even talking about adding a math class, but yet we're going to improve in math. We're going to improve in reading. We're going to improve in all the academics. Right? PBIS, ESSA, right? Every Student Succeeds Act, it's in the law. It's in the law. We want to have a non-academic factor of success as well as positive behavior interventions and supports. And so what I want to do is jump into a demonstration for Conover Online. It's an online program to assess and teach SEL. And what I did was, again, being from Chicago, living up here, I am absolutely still a Bears fan. So I made my student, Mitchell Trubisky. For those of you who follow the NFL, we're hoping that he starts pretty quick here after last week's performance. However, I digress. The first thing that we want to be able to do is jump into the assessment. Our assessment is called the Personal Skills Map. And what we want to be able to do with the Personal Skills Map is identify those competencies that you saw in those personas. Okay? And what we do with this is we ask them multiple choice questions that they can answer. And the thing is, this is all web-based. So they answer it on their smartphone. They answer it on their computer, any Chromebook. And people always ask all the time, like, what about a smartboard? What about a Mac? What about, there are no plugins or anything. Basically, if you have internet, this will work. Now, what's really slick about this is we're tracking and scoring all of their responses. They can even start and stop. So if I'm on question 53 and I stop today, I log in a few hours or in a few years. I'll be on question 53 till I finish. So it's self-paced. It's going to have full audio, right, to read it aloud. And we're tracking their responses so you guys can get the data and analytics. And it's, again, instantaneous. You can have them at one spot in a lab setting with 30 computers, have them log in and do it. Or you can have them log in on their phones in 30 different locations at home for homework. Regardless, what happens is we automatically compute the results, spit out the results, so you guys get a graph for every single one of your students. Now imagine this. In a matter of 45 minutes, you take a classroom into a lab or you send it home for homework. But either way, you get 30 results of your 30 students instantaneously like this. And you can get a grasp of what's going on with their skill sets in relationship to these competencies and scales. That's crazy, right? Because now it's not subjective. It's not teacher A saying, Johnny, you are really bad at empathy. Teacher B saying, Johnny, you're really good at empathy. Well, wait a minute. What is going on here, right? Why does teacher A say this, teacher B say this? There's a discrepancy. Now it's Johnny saying this about himself. And I saw someone jump in about the research. I will touch on that in about 5 minutes because there's a lot of it. So, but after what we do is more important and not more important, but after the assessment is what's next. Because what's next is going to be interventions. We have all of the competencies that we measure. We want to teach the deficiencies. So if Johnny lacks empathy, Art lacks interpersonal awareness, well, then I want those students to go through those things respectively. Well, that's where our program comes in handy because now it individualizes and differentiates the instruction based on that initial assessment. So now if Mitch Trubisky is bad at time management, well, then we're going to go through the time management unit. Each one of these sections is going to have 1 to 2 hours of content. And then we're going to have 30 to 60 seconds for each one of these videos, micro learning, right? So not 6 minutes, not 6 hours, not 60 minutes. They're micro learning. They're short little videos. There's about 550 videos in this entire program. Okay. Meanwhile, as they're working on all this stuff, we're going to be tracking and saving, like I mentioned, that response. So all of you guys sitting here would have potentially an admin account where you can see all the events that are taking place in the system. But more importantly, you can log in and see what's going on with Mitch individually. So say if it's a special education student, you have an IEP meeting coming up and you want to see what Mitchell did. Boom, there it is. Time on task, date started, date completed, and then overall his scales and what exactly they mean. One of the most important things that we see with our program is the fact that the students, parents, teachers can understand exactly what it means. One of the key differences that I've found in taking different assessments is, and most of them are really good, and I genuinely mean that. The problem is when I look at the interpretive guides and I'm trying to decipher exactly what it means, it looks like hieroglyphics to me. I have no idea what it means, the stress management 12 out of 50. Okay, well, here, this is the raw score. 0 to 21. What exactly does it mean? Okay, so now the students can understand, mom and dad can understand, teachers can understand how to initiate this change. Because if we don't understand, if I don't understand what change needs to happen and why, then I'm not going to change, right? If I don't see the importance of it, I'm not going to change. This allows me, the student, to understand why it's important to manage my stress, to have empathy, interpersonal awareness. The details on all of the skill enhancements are in here. And what's so nice is it's not any time, if you will. So like JASIC could have done this back in like 2013. This data is going to be here. Okay, this data is going to be here. And so the ability for you to track and print and download all this data is going to be there as well. Okay. So someone, before we get into your questions and answers, I'm going to jump into some frequently asked questions, and maybe this will ease some of those. And if not, absolutely type them in. You can type them in right now. But who else uses Conover? Well, you can go on our website under the About page. It'll list this, but I put a screenshot up here. We have over 13,000 customers in the U.S. and foreign countries. Public sector, private sector. Obviously, in the public sector, a lot of schools, a lot of you guys. Huge school districts, small school districts, and then obviously private with some of the EQ, emotional intelligence stuff with HR and training. Okay. So our website has a lot of resources for you to go ahead and check that out. And Brian says he can't see them, but go on our website, because this is it's a screenshot, so it's kind of small, but you can go on the website and you guys can actually click on the About page and see all the different lists there. So I apologize, but I can't zoom in on that one. Someone asked, I alluded to this, I think it was Ann in there, I'm not sure, but someone asked about the research. And all of our social emotional programs, and we have a couple in there, but this one's the one with the most research. It's called our Success Profiler, and then the assessment is the Personal Skills Map. And the research, there's over 170 doctoral dissertations and research papers, and it's norm-based. And the MMPI scales and all that stuff that psychologists and you guys, some of you that might be in here, know about more so than me, because that's not my expertise, if you will, right? I'm an armchair psychologist. But that's why we have the research available on our website, because I want you to download it, look at it, see exactly how it works. It's actually under the Success Profiler, because that's the one with that assessment. And I'll show you how that looks and works. But it's under Products, the Success Profiler, and then at the very, very bottom is right here, the research. So you can download that. But over 9 million administrations, And then, like I said, norm-based, and there's 35,000 participants in that as well. But download that. I always like to say this will be the reading that you need to go to sleep if you are having some trouble. So, so that's that. So download that. What other additional costs are there? So the way that this works is obviously it's research-based. Obviously there's analytics. Obviously there's data there to track what you're doing. So a lot of people use grant funding because, again, there's strings tied to federal money and grant funding and all that stuff. So what you are buying are what we call $5 credits. And you can buy them in increments of 1. So like, for example, and literally that's the cost. I mean, people kind of get confused on this. So let me explain and dig a little bit deeper in this. You buy $5 credits. You could buy 1, you could buy 100, you could buy 1,000, you could buy 100,000. Literally any number, you just multiply that times 5. Well, let's just say you bought 1,000 just for the sake, right? So that cost is $5,000. You have 1,000 credits. What happens then is you guys are in control of how those credits are spent. So you could have your students do the SEL assessment. You could have 1,000 students do the SEL assessment because it's 1 credit per assessment per student. You could have 500 students do the assessment and a skill enhancement unit. You could have, right, and you could do the math. But basically, these 100 credits are in your district account, in your school account to use. And then you can spend them on the students that you want. So you only pay for what you actually use. You only assign a credit to a student that you know is going to work on a program. And the credits never, ever expire. So we have some districts. In fact, I see Paula had mentioned that Gaston County uses our stuff, and you're absolutely right, which is nice because credits can be used on any program, including the career readiness program. But they never expire. They roll over year to year until you use them. And so when people talk to me about, I don't have money or we don't have funding, I always explain to them, hey, listen, that 1 week, don't get Starbucks. Take that $5, buy a credit. I had a teacher last week buy 4 credits. She's like, Art, I literally only have $20. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's cool. $5 a piece times 4 credits is $20. And so she spent $20. And now she's in there piloting it to hopefully show the powers that be that, hey, we need this and let's buy more credits. And so there's no minimums. So there's really no excuses, is what I like to say. What you get is a personalized setup with myself or Brian. You get training for you and your staff, technical support, administrative help, video tutorials, live chat support. And actually, one of the things with our chat support, I think, Brian, we're down to like, what, 2 minutes, 3 minutes on our chat support. So that's pretty cool. Our response time is like 2 minutes if you type in a message. So that actually sends it here in Wisconsin, and we have to reply to get it off our computer screens. It's pretty cool. So we have to answer you guys. So, and then 24/7 access and the data management and reporting. So how do I know that this program is going to work for my program? Well, Brian's going to put up on the right-hand side a link to a free trial. And what this is literally everything that I just went through. You're going to go through the personal skills map. You're going to get access to go through the personal skills map. Then you're going to go through the skill enhancements. And then you're going to go through the post. You're going to go through the whole process as if you are a user. Because moral of the story is we want you guys to really dig in, really see if this is going to work for you. Because in all honesty, that's what I want. If it doesn't, then perfect. We'll just go our separate ways. And so the idea here is for you guys to put in some information. What happens is Brian actually fills out the form. After you fill out the form, he gets your info, creates a trial for you, and then emails you a link so you can actually log in and go through the trial. That's how that works. Okay? And so you guys can get your feet wet and kind of get a feel for exactly how this works. So you'll get a login. Okay? So we're going to jump in. I know I'm right at the buzzer here, so I took a little bit longer. But I'm going to answer some questions that I see in here, one of which is this just a data program, or is there a program to implement to help improve the behaviors? Yes. The answer is there is a way to implement our program to help improve the behaviors. And I was kind of speeding through it, so I'll back up a little bit. But after the students take the assessment, and you'll see this in the trial, so sign up for that trial. Absolutely sign up for that trial. But what happens is after they take the assessment, there's actually this curriculum that's assigned to your students individually. So for example, I went through this assessment really quickly, but these are my 3 that I scored the lowest on. So now I'm going to go through these 3. And so this is the curriculum, to answer your question, to implement to help improve these behaviors. Because what we want to do with empathy and time management and physical wellness and aggression, all that stuff, is we first want to explain what it is. And then we want to explain why you need it, why you need to improve it. And then you need to go through the how. So how do I get better at managing my time? How do I get better with improving my empathy? So absolutely, this is a program not only to assess and give you data, but to implement to improve these behaviors. Because at the end of each one of these units, there's a post-test to measure those gains. So you might have scored in the develop for time management, but now you're going to go into the green enhance or something like that. Great question. Next question is, who is the youngest age that this has been used with students? Or what is the youngest age? Excuse me. Where I've seen it most successfully used, the youngest age, middle school. So 6th, 7th, 8th at middle school is where I've seen it. Anything younger, I've seen it, but in my opinion, it's not the the greatest. It's not the greatest. So that's why typically we see middle school is about the youngest students. Someone asks, it's all online or is it teacher led? So the social emotional learning program is all online. It's designed to individualize the process. However, and I think this was Lark that actually had asked this question, so you can actually message us for more details on this because my back's up against the wall with time. Speaking of time management, right? But we do have another program that is a blended approach. And what this program is designed to do is teach an instructor-led format of these social emotional learning skills or these soft skills. So it mirrors everything that's in the program here. It just gives you access as a teacher. So no students have access to this. It's strictly the teacher. And what it is you click on the videos, you click on the programs like empathy, and you just project it on a wall with the PDF workbooks. Okay, and this is the instructor-led. So it's a blended approach. It's a blended approach. And again, this program I didn't jump into, and I'm just speeding through it in the last 3 minutes here. So if you guys have questions on this, let me know. But yeah, there's dual approaches for online and teacher-led. So great question. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, good. Well, I'm going to let you guys go. I'm over my time slot, and I appreciate your time because time is our most valuable resource, and I genuinely mean that. So what I'm going to do is wrap it up, get you guys on your way. If you need anything from us, you can reply to the reminder emails. You can email sales@Conover. You can hit us up on social media because we have that as well, or you can dial us at the 800 number, and then here is my extension directly. Okay? Because the way I see it is there should be no excuses to incorporate this into the students and help them improve their skill sets. They need to be successful when they leave. Okay? So call me, talk to me. Brian's number is 7880 is his number. So you can call him as well. Okay? Awesome. So make sure to sign up for the trial. You guys will get an email tomorrow with all of the information, including the replay of this webinar and the resources that I had mentioned, like the 51 benefits of SEL and our SEL standards. That'll be in the email that was promised to you when you signed up as well. So look for that email. Otherwise, I look forward to talking to all of you. Jennifer, Sherry, Amy, Joy, Michelle, thank you guys so much for coming. Gail, Joanne, I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to y'all very, very soon.